correct. The rest of the context is equally puzzling, with Rav Sheshet asking the Reish Galuta's servant to cut off the legs of an animal, and we assume that they retire to the palace kitchens and can only produce 3 legs, because Rav Sheshet's servant has stolen one. So when Rav Sheshet challenges them, the servants are forced to acquire another limb, this time from another animal, and in the end Rav Sheshet's servant brings the stolen limb and the animal ends up with 5 legs. So why didn't the servant simply admit that 1 leg had been stolen? He said, bring me the legs of the animal. They what's missing, huh? The episode makes very little sense entirely, partly because, but why doesn't it make sense? Partly because of our own idée fixe and the wrong conception about the setting of this contest. That it's a dinner with an animal being prepared in the Exarch's kitchens. Huh? Our imagination tries to fill in the gaps of the story, but it turns out our imagination leads us in the wrong direction. It's wrong. Huh? So here's where we begin to speculate once again. What if this story has nothing to do with dinner or kitchens or kashrut? Has a totally different sitzen leben. The Hebrew term Eva Menachai, this charge that Rav Sheshet levels against the household of the Beit Reish Galuta, simply means vivisection. So we propose that the basis of the story is that Rav Sheshet refused to participate in a banquet of the Reish Galuta because of general objections which were not based on having a kosher kitchen. Rav Sheshet's accusation against the staff of the Reish Galuta is that they indulge in animal vivisection. Now let's see how this works. We need to know something about animal vivisection in the world at that time, for which we have some useful and rather colorful information. Ostensibly, the justification for animal vivisection in antiquity was the same as now, namely scientific inquiry. The specific reason in antiquity, however, was that human anatomy was more or less a closed book until the 16th century, when human bodies were finally being carefully dissected and faithfully recorded by Vesalius and others. Is this correct? The taboos against autopsy and dissecting human bodies predominated in the ancient world, except for a very brief period in the 3rd century BC Alexandria, where Herophilus and colleagues were dissecting live humans, usually prisoners, in order to uncover the secrets of internal anatomy. There's a wonderful book about this by Heinrich von Stadt. Now, this shocking, cruel practice in the name of medical science was very short-lived. And afterwards, as before, most of the knowledge of anatomy came from dissecting animals for whatever reasons, exactly as what you discussed in the beginning. However, the practice developed in Roman times of dissecting live animals, and the richest descriptions we have of such practices come from Galen himself, a self-acknowledged and enthusiastic participant in this practice, live vivisection. In fact, the information we have from Galen and from others on animal vivisection in the 2nd century CE is rather shocking. As Mark Gleason aptly describes, Galen's anatomical demonstrations on living animals constitute a justly famous chapter in the history of scientific method, and his public demonstrations of dissections of live animals reduced onlookers to gaping amazement. These public demonstrations of anatomical knowledge were competitive events between doctors, lasting as long as 3 days and attracting large audiences. Susan Mattern compares them to public gladiatorial contests that became a form of public entertainment throughout the Roman Empire, including in eastern cities such as Ephesus. Dio Chrysostom, a 1st century CE witness to such events, describes how performing doctors sit in a state in the middle of a crowd, holding forth about joints, bones, and the refinement of pneuma, while their audience gapes as if bewitched. What is also clear is that these public events were sanctioned by the authorities, since one of Galen's most famous dissections was carried out in front of the Pontifex Maximus and chief physicians of Pergamum. On another occasion, Galen's public dissection was organized by the consul Boethus in the presence of Rome's intellectual elite. And this was not the only occasion on which Galen's dissections were viewed by consular officials. So the interesting question is, what happened to such public displays of cruelty to animals in the name of medical knowledge? Heinrich von Staden assures me that by the 3rd century CE, the same century in which Rav Sheshet flourished, such events were being viewed negatively, and they eventually ceased. With the advent of Christianity, medical inquiry no longer remained a priority, and animal experimentation lapsed with the waning interest in pursuing all natural science, including medicine. Within Judaism, it would be easy to explain the opposition to vivisection based upon the principles of Tzar Balei Chaim, and of course, Eber Min HaChai, as we just discussed. However, there is one rather extraordinary account in the Talmud of an autopsy in the 1st century CE, which remains a mystery, since human dissection had not been practiced in the ancient Mediterranean for some 3 centuries. The Talmudic passage, this is Bechorot 45a, a very famous one, tells us that the students of Rav Ishmael examined the body of a prostitute who was to be burned by the king. And he found 252 bones rather than the usual 248 bones of the male body. The difference explained by extra bones forming 2 hinges and 2 doors in a woman's anatomy. It's not clear what these hinges and doors refer to. But there's another Talmudic reference to a human dissection in Tractate in Nida 30b, and this refers to, again, a famous passage, Queen Cleopatra in Egypt dissecting the bodies of her female servants who had been condemned to death to confirm from empirical evidence whether male and female embryos required the same number of days after conception to develop. This story is also attributed to Rav Ishmael as its source. At this point, we have to withdraw from any further speculation and conclude we just don't know. I certainly don't know how and why such reports arrived in Babylonia and were recorded in the Talmud. But we ought to declare them to be fantasies in any event. It is highly doubtful that either Rav Ishmael's students or Cleopatra were dissecting handmaidens or prostitutes. Finally, after this long digression, we return once again to Rav Sheshet and the Reish Galuta and his servants. Now, before we try to reconstruct what's actually happening in this story, first let's look at a couple of other interesting details which have been missed by translators and commentators. So after the initial contest, in which Rav Sheshet proves that the Reish Galuta servants are rogues, they dissected live animals, he then agrees to have something to eat. Shei Exilar. The reason why Rav Sheshet agrees to dine this time around is that the previous story of the 5-legged animal had nothing to do with kashrut or kosher, but had some other purpose which we'll get to in a minute. But when Rav Sheshet finally sits down to this fleishy meal, let's go to this. He discovers something. We should mention that Rav Sheshet is blind, but he feels something unusual in the meat, which he removes and puts in his scarf. What is it? The object is described rather baroquely as something that would choke a mother-in-law. We mentioned this before. And again, we have to speculate, but I think we're on firm ground. This kind of description is very apt for herbs and plants, which often have very exotic names. And a very good example of such comes from Syriac sources, which record a poisonous plant called Chanek Deva. It chokes a wolf. Probably the term for the plant, this plant is wolfsbane, which is also identified with Greek akoniton or aconite. So there is a plant known as it chokes a wolf. It's a deadly poison. It's also known as women's bane. Now this explains something very interesting in our story. When the Exilarch servants, up to their usual tricks, insinuate that Rav Sheshet has stolen the silver goblet and search his scarf, they find this poisonous herb which they themselves planted in his dinner. And they rhetorically turn the tables on him. They accuse that Rav Sheshet has really come to vex us, as it's usually translated, although the word is not vex. Look what the word is. The word is Sa'ar, exactly. He's come to make us ill, to afflict us. Exactly what's the same word used with Rav Amram in the same page of this Gemara. Or to cause us pain, could be. Huh? So this very same word used in the story of Rav Amram, Achasid, when the exilarch's servants made him ill by causing him to have a chill. Now Rav Sheshet has come to poison them. This is what they're accusing him of. But this is not the end of this contest of wits, since Rav Sheshet now parries with a nice coup de grace. He has tasted the meat and found that it had symptoms of whiteness. Now, what is this? Here we come to the most intriguing and perhaps the most speculative point in our analysis of this event. As you probably gather by now, I believe that the first part of the story about Eva ben Achai and the three-legged or the five-legged animal had nothing to do with kashrut or banqueting, but is an oblique reference to animal vivisection, which is really what Eva ben Achai means. So Rav Sheshet wants to accuse the household of the Reish Geluta of practices which are unethical, but at the same time reflect that